The air in downtown Seattle was crisp, carrying the faint tang of Puget Sound as Michael Clark adjusted his tie in the reflection of a glass storefront. At 32, he'd built a solid reputation as a financial consultant, his sharp mind and steady demeanor earning him clients across the Pacific Northwest. Tonight, though, his skills felt irrelevant. He was about to meet the parents of his fiancée, Emily Russell, at Skyview, an upscale restaurant perched atop one of the city's sleekest high-rises. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed the glittering skyline, but the view did nothing to calm the storm brewing in his chest. His charcoal suit fit like a second skin. His cufflinks gleamed, and he'd rehearsed his smile in the mirror that morning, willing warmth into his voice. Emily squeezed his hand as they approached the entrance, her emerald eyes bright with encouragement. "You've got this, Michael," she whispered, her voice a soft anger. But her confidence only tightened the knot in his stomach. They were ushered into a private dining room, the kind reserved for corporate titans closing multi-million-dollar deals. The mahogany table gleamed under pendant lights, its surface reflecting the soft glow like a polished mirror. Crystal glassware stood in precise rows, catching the light and refracting it into tiny prisms that danced across the walls. A waiter in a crisp tuxedo poured champagne into flutes, the bubbles rising like a promise of celebration. Michael doubted that promise even before he sat down. Across the table, Emily's parents waited, their presence commanding the room. Harold Russell, a real estate magnate whose name adorned half the city's skyline, sat with the posture of a general, his tailored navy suit sharp as armor. His gaze was steady, unyielding, sizing Michael up like a ledger entry. Beside him, Linda Russell offered a polite smile that didn't reach her tired eyes, her silk dress whispering wealth. Michael swallowed, feeling the weight of the engagement ring in his jacket pocket, a small velvet box that suddenly felt like a boulder. The conversation began smoothly enough, a careful dance of pleasantries. Michael spoke about his work, highlighting a recent project that had saved a tech startup from bankruptcy. He kept his tone measured, successful but not boastful, aware of the delicate balance he needed to strike. Harold nodded once, a curt gesture that revealed nothing. Linda asked about his family, and Michael shared stories of his parents' small bookstore in Tacoma and his sister's work as a community organizer. He smiled, recalling their laughter over Sunday dinners, but Harold's expression shifted, a faint smirk curling his lips as if Michael's modest roots were a private joke. The first course arrived, oysters nestled on a bed of crushed ice, delicate and pristine. Michael took a bite, forcing a smile as the briny flavor hit his tongue. The conversation turned to future plans, homes, traditions, children. Michael pictured the cozy craftsman house he and Emily had dreamed of renovating, but he nodded along to Harold's talk of sprawling estates, biting back his own vision. Then came a blow. Harold leaned back, steepling his fingers, his voice low and laced with mockery. "So, Michael," he said, drawing out the name like a verdict, "what's your plan when Emily's trust fund runs dry? Or is that when you cash out and move on?" The words landed like a fist, each syllable sharp and deliberate. The room seemed to shrink, the pendant lights dimming as if the air itself had thickened. Michael's chest tightened. He glanced at Emily, expecting her to bristle, to defend him, to call out her father's cruelty. Instead, she laughed. Not a nervous chuckle, not a polite deflection, but a full, throaty laugh that wrapped around Harold's words and made them cut deeper. Her eyes sparkled with amusement, as if Michael's worth was a punchline she'd been waiting to hear. The ring in his pocket burned, a symbol of a promise now tainted. Time slowed. Michael's gaze dropped to the flute in front of him, the champagne's golden bubbles mocking his stillness. He saw the silver band on Emily's finger catch the light, a mirror of the one he carried. His mind raced through their engagement. The night he proposed on a rooftop deck, fairy lights twinkling as she pressed her cheek to his, the Seattle skyline glowing behind them. Those moments, once sacred, now felt like lies. He realized this wasn't just a dinner, it was a test, and he'd failed before it began. Harold's smirk, Emily's laughter. They saw him as an outsider, a temporary fixture in their world of wealth and privilege. His hand moved before his mind caught up. He slipped the ring from his pocket, its weight no longer a comfort, but a chain. He placed it beside Emily's wine glass, the crimson liquid rippling as if startled by the gesture. The room hushed. The waiter froze mid-step. Every eye turned to him. "I'm done," Michael said, his voice low but steady. He stood, his chair scraping the polished floor, the sound a sharp note in the silence. Emily's smile faltered, confusion flickering across her face, but she didn't speak, didn't reach for him. Harold's smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of surprise. Linda's eyes widened, her hand twitching as if to stop him, but she remained still. Michael turned, his steps deliberate, each one a rejection of the life he'd thought he wanted. The soft click of his shoes on the marble floor echoed like a closing door. Outside, the night air hit him like a wave, cool and bracing. He stood under a street lamp, the city humming around him, cars honking, distant laughter, the pulse of life indifferent to his unraveling. For the first time, he felt a strange relief, a whisper of freedom beneath the ache. The dinner had shattered his dreams, but it had also cracked open a truth. He deserved better than a world that laughed at his worth. Michael Clark woke to the sterile hum of the air conditioner in his room at the Emerald Stay Hotel, a mid-tier spot he'd chosen in a haze after leaving Skyview. The events of the previous night clung to him like damp fog. Harold Russell's biting words, Emily's laughter, the weight of the ring he'd left behind. His phone, resting on the nightstand, buzzed relentlessly, its screen streaked with notifications. Messages from Emily piled up, each one a variation of, "I'm sorry," or "Please talk to me." Friends sent tentative texts, their concern veiled in vague questions. "You okay, man? What happened?" He ignored them all, switching his phone to do not disturb mode. The silence was a small mercy, a chance to breathe without the world pressing in. He sat on the edge of the bed, running his hands through his dark hair, trying to piece together what came next. The room's beige walls and generic art felt like a blank slate, but his chest ached with the hollow weight of betrayal. He showered, the hot water doing little to wash away the sting of the dinner. Dressing in a fresh shirt and jeans from the duffel bag he'd hastily packed, Michael caught his reflection in the mirror. Bloodshot eyes, hollow cheeks, a man who looked like he'd lost more than a fiancée. He needed grounding, something familiar. He headed to Brood Awakening, a no-frills coffee shop in Capitol Hill that had been his refuge during late-night work sessions. Settling at a window table with a double espresso and a bagel, he stared at the city moving outside. Pedestrians weaving through morning traffic, a street vendor arranging flowers, life marching on as if his world hadn't just fractured. The bitterness of the coffee grounded him, each sip a reminder to focus. His phone buzzed again, this time a call from Sarah Wilson, the CEO of Vantage Technologies, a client he'd been advising for months. He answered, bracing himself. "Michael," Sarah's voice was calm, but edged with concern. "I got a call this morning from Harold Russell's firm, Mercer & Company. They're requesting your financial records, bank statements, credit history, even proof of funds letters. They claimed it's due diligence for our partnership." Michael's grip tightened on the ceramic mug, his knuckles whitening. Harold wasn't content with humiliating him at dinner. He was targeting his career, wielding his influence like a blade. "What did you tell them?" Michael asked, keeping his tone even despite the fury bubbling inside. Sarah sighed. "I told them it's unnecessary. Your work speaks for itself." But they were insistent, almost aggressive. "Something feels off, Michael. What's going on?" He pinched the bridge of his nose, his mind racing. Harold's joke at dinner had been a warning shot. This was the real attack. "Thanks for the heads up, Sarah," he said. "I'll handle it." Hanging up, Michael leaned back, staring at the ceiling as if it held answers. Harold's move wasn't just personal. It was strategic, a power play to undermine Michael's credibility. He opened his laptop and began digging, pulling up public records on Mercer & Company. The firm's reputation was polished, but whispers of aggressive tactics lingered in industry forums. Competitors pressured, deals swayed by questionable means. Michael's consulting work relied on trust, and Harold was betting he could erode it. His phone pinged again, this time an email from Emily. Attached were photos from their trip to Napa Valley. Vineyards at dusk, their hands intertwined over glasses of Cabernet. Her message was brief. "I'm so sorry about last night. Can we talk? I love you." The words felt like a script, rehearsed and hollow. He saw her laughter again, the way it had amplified her father's cruelty. Had she known Harold would go this far? Michael deleted the email without replying, his resolve hardening. He called a friend, David, a compliance officer at First National Bank. Can you check if Mercer and Company made any inquiries on my accounts? Michael asked, his voice steady but urgent. David promised to look and called back within the hour. They tried, he confirmed. 2 requests for your statements, flagged as high priority. We blocked them, lack proper authorization. But, Michael, this isn't standard. They're phishing. Michael thanked him, his mind churning. Harold was weaponizing corporate protocols, betting Michael wouldn't fight back. But he was wrong. Michael contacted a lawyer, Rachel Torres, who specialized in financial privacy. Over a quick call, she outlined his options. File a formal complaint with the state's financial regulator, demand transparency from Mercer and Company, and document every move. This could be harassment, Rachel said. We'll build a case. Michael agreed, feeling a spark of agency. He wasn't just a victim. He could fight. Back at the coffee shop, he drafted an email to Sarah, outlining his credentials. Years of audited financials, client testimonials, and a spotless record. Harold's inquiries are baseless, he wrote. I'll provide any documents you need to shut this down. Sending it felt like drawing a line in the sand. He leaned back, sipping his now-cold espresso, and glanced at the street outside. A young couple laughed as they shared a pastry, their ease a stark contrast to the knot in his chest. His phone buzzed again, another text from Emily. Please, Michael, let's fix this. He pictured her at the dinner table, her laughter echoing Harold's words. Had she known her father would escalate? Her silence felt like complicity, a choice to protect her family's world over their shared one. He typed a reply, I need space, and hit send before he could second-guess himself. As the afternoon faded, Michael walked along the waterfront, the Puget Sound's waves lapping against the pier. The city's pulse, ferry horns, distant music, felt like a reminder that life continued, even if his felt paused. He stopped at a bench, pulling the velvet box from his pocket. The ring he'd planned to give Emily glinted in the fading light, a symbol of a future that no longer existed. He didn't throw it into the water. That was too dramatic, too final. Instead, he tucked it away, a reminder of what he'd walked away from and why. Harold's attack on his career was a new battle, one he'd face with proof, not pleas. Emily's apologies couldn't erase her laughter, but they couldn't erase his worth either. For the first time since the dinner, Michael felt a flicker of strength, a resolve to reclaim his story, not as Emily's fiancé or Harold's target, but as Michael Clark, a man who wouldn't bend. The Seattle morning was gray, the kind of drizzle that clung to everything, softening the edges of the city. Michael Clark sat in his temporary apartment, a modest studio in Belltown, staring at the laptop screen where emails from clients blinked for attention. The past week had been a blur of defensive maneuvers, calls with his lawyer, Rachel Torres, and late-night research into Mercer and Company's tactics. Harold Russell's attempt to undermine his career by probing his financials had lit a fire in Michael, but it was a controlled burn, fueling his resolve rather than consuming him. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. An email from an unfamiliar address. Linda Russell, Emily's mother. The subject line was simple. Can we meet? Michael's jaw tightened. He hadn't spoken to Linda since the dinner at Skyview, where her silence had been as deafening as Emily's laughter. Curiosity edged out his hesitation, and he replied, suggesting Maple Brew, a cozy cafe on the outskirts of Seattle known for its mismatched chairs and warm scones. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he wasn't the same man who'd walked into that restaurant a week ago, hoping for approval. At Maple Brew, the scent of fresh coffee and cinnamon greeted him as he stepped inside. Linda was already there, seated at a corner table beneath a painting of wildflowers, her hands folded around a steaming mug. She looked different, less polished, her hair falling in loose waves, faint lines around her eyes betraying years of unspoken burdens. She rose as Michael approached, offering a tentative smile and a handshake that felt fragile, her fingers cool and slender. Thank you for coming, she said, her voice softer than he remembered, almost breakable. Michael nodded, sitting across from her, his posture guarded. The waiter approached with menus, but Linda waved him off. I'm not hungry, she said, her gaze drifting to the window where rain streaked the glass. Michael waited, sensing she was gathering courage for something more than small talk. I'm sorry, Linda began, her words stumbling into the quiet. For what Harold said at dinner, for what Emily did, for all of it. Her eyes, a muted blue, met his briefly before dropping to her hands. We didn't see you, Michael. We saw our daughter, our legacy, and whatever we thought you represented. It was cruel, and I let it happen. The confession hit like a gust of wind, raw and unexpected. Michael had braced for excuses, not this. He studied her face, searching for the woman who'd offered polite smiles at family gatherings, who'd once complimented his risotto during a holiday dinner. That Linda had seemed untouchable, a pillar of the Russell Empire. Now, she was just a woman, her shoulders slumped under the weight of regret. "Why now?" Michael asked, his voice low but steady. Linda took a deep breath, as if steadying herself against the tide. "Because I've spent 30 years conforming to my father, then Harold, then the life they built. I saw you walk out of that restaurant, and it reminded me of something I lost, the courage to stand up." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a small velvet box, placing it on the table between them. Michael's pulse quickened. He hesitated, his fingers hovering over the box as if it might burn him. Inside was a silver ring, its band simple but elegant, set with a dark sapphire that caught the cafe's soft light like a secret. "This was mine," Linda said, her voice steady now. "My mother gave it to me on my 21st birthday before I married into Harold's world. I wore it to remind myself who I was. I hid it for years, afraid of what his family would think. But after Skyview, I knew it belonged with someone who understands her own worth." Michael lifted the ring, its cool weight grounding him. The sapphire gleamed, a deep blue that seemed to hold stories of its own. "It's beautiful," he murmured, turning it in his palm. Linda's smile was faint, tinged with sorrow. "It's yours now, Michael. Not as a gift from me, but as a symbol of what you already have, dignity. You didn't let Harold define you. You walked away." Her words stirred something in him, a mix of gratitude and pain. He slipped the ring onto his finger, surprised by how perfectly it fit, as if it had always belonged there. "Why me?" he asked, his throat tight. Linda leaned forward, her eyes fierce with conviction. "Because you refused to trade your self-respect for their approval. I've spent my life bending, but you stood tall. That ring is a reminder. You don't owe anyone your worth." The cafe's bustle faded around them, the clink of cups and murmur of voices distant. Michael felt a swell of emotion, gratitude for her honesty, anger at the years she'd stayed silent, and a quiet hope that he could carry this forward. "Thank you," he said, the words heavy with meaning. Linda exhaled, her shoulders relaxing as if unburdened. "You're welcome, Michael. And know this, you deserve someone who sees you without hesitation." He nodded, her words sinking deep. For too long, he'd sought validation from Emily, from Harold, from his own doubts. Now, with this ring, he felt a shift, a claim to his own value. Their conversation softened, turning to lighter things, his consulting projects, her quiet love for watercolor painting. For the first time, Michael saw Linda not as Emily's mother or Harold's wife, but as a woman who'd reclaimed a piece of herself. When they parted, she squeezed his hand, her touch warm now. "Be good to yourself," she said. Michael stepped into the rain, the sapphire ring glinting on his finger like a beacon. He walked down the street, the city's pulse steady around him, cars splashing through puddles, a busker strumming a guitar. The weight of the dinner, of Harold's attack, still lingered, but Linda's gesture had given him armor. He called Rachel, his lawyer, from a park bench, the drizzle soaking his jacket. "I want to move forward with a complaint against Mercer and Company," he said. Harold's crossed a line. Rachel's voice was calm but resolute. "We got enough to make them answer. Let's do this." As he hung up, Michael looked at the ring, its sapphire catching the gray light. Harold's financial probes were a threat, but they'd also awakened something in him, a refusal to be diminished. Emily's silence, her laughter, had cut deep, but Linda's courage showed him another path. He stood, the rain cool on his face, and felt a spark of purpose. This wasn't just about protecting his career. It was about proving his worth to himself and to the world that had tried to break him. The Seattle skyline shimmered under a rare burst of late morning sun, its glass towers reflecting light like a mosaic of ambition. Michael Clark sat in his Belltown studio, the sapphire ring on his finger catching the glow as he reviewed the latest email from his lawyer, Rachel Torres. The complaint against Mercer and Company had gained traction. The state's financial regulator had launched an investigation into Harold Russell's firm for unauthorized inquiries into Michael's accounts. Evidence was mounting, email trails, call logs, and a whistleblower from Mercer and Company who'd hinted at a pattern of coercive tactics. Michael's fight wasn't just personal anymore. It was a stand against a man who'd built an empire on intimidation. Yet, the weight of it all pressed against his chest. He wasn't fighting for revenge, but for justice, a distinction that kept him grounded as he sipped black coffee, its bitterness a steadying force. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. A text from Emily. "We need to talk. Please, Michael, meet me at Blackwell's, 2 p.m. His jaw tightened. Her messages had dwindled over the past week, each one a plea wrapped in regret, but none had addressed her role in enabling Harold's attack. Michael hesitated, his thumb hovering over the screen. Part of him wanted to ignore her, to let the silence speak for him. But another part, the part that still remembered their quiet mornings in Napa, urged him to hear her out. He typed a curt reply, "I'll be there," and hit send before doubt could creep in. He slipped on a jacket, the sapphire ring a cool reminder of Linda's words. "You don't owe anyone your worth." As he stepped into the elevator, he steeled himself for what lay ahead. Blackwell's Cafe was tucked in a quiet corner of Pike Place Market, its exposed brick walls and warm lighting a stark contrast to Skyview's sterile opulence. Emily was already there, seated by a window overlooking the bustling market. Her auburn hair was pulled into a loose bun, her face pale, eyes rimmed with fatigue. She stood as Michael approached, her hands fidgeting with a napkin. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice trembling but earnest. Michael sat, his posture rigid, and nodded for her to continue. She took a shaky breath. "I didn't know Dad would go after your finances. I asked him to help fix things after the dinner, to smooth it over. He said he'd handle it professionally. I swear, I didn't know what he meant." Her words tumbled out, each one a plea for belief, but Michael's gaze hardened. "You asked him to fix things?" he said, his voice low, each word sharp. "After you laughed with him? After you let him call me a gold digger? You handed him the reins, Emily." Her eyes glistened, tears threatening to spill. "I was scared," she whispered. "Scared of losing him, of losing my family. I thought if I waited, if I played along, I could make it right without a fight." Michael leaned forward, his voice steady but cutting. "You chose silence over me. You chose him, and now my career's on the line because of it." Emily's hand reached for his, but he pulled back, the ring glinting as a silent shield. "I'm done being collateral damage," he said. Her lips quivered, but she didn't speak. The cafe's hum, clinking cups, soft chatter, felt distant, the space between them vast. Michael stood, his chair scraping the hardwood floor. "I filed a complaint against your father," he said. "The regulator's digging into Mercer and Company. This isn't about hurting you. It's about stopping him." Emily's eyes widened, a mix of shock and fear. "Michael, please. This could ruin him." He shook his head. "He tried to ruin me first." He walked out, leaving her at the table, her silhouette framed against the market's chaos. The air outside was sharp, carrying the scent of fish and salt. Michael's heart pounded, but it wasn't anger driving him. It was clarity. Harold's actions, Emily's complicity, had pushed him to reclaim his agency. He wouldn't let their world define him. Days later, the investigation broke open. A local news outlet published a story, Mercer and Company, under scrutiny for financial misconduct. The article detailed how Harold's firm had used unauthorized inquiries to pressure competitors and consultants, citing Michael's case among others. Social media buzzed, ex-posts amplifying the scandal with hashtags like #MercerExposed. Michael's phone lit up with messages, support from colleagues, cautious inquiries from clients. Sarah Wilson, his CEO client at Vantage Technologies, called with a rare excitement in her voice. "Michael, the board's impressed with how you've handled this. Your transparency shut down Harold's claims. We want you as a partner, not just a consultant." The offer hit like sunlight breaking through clouds. Michael thanked her, his voice steady but his chest swelling with vindication. That evening, he sat on his apartment's small balcony, a glass of bourbon in hand, the city's lights sprawling below. The sapphire ring gleamed, a quiet testament to his resolve. He opened his laptop and found an email from Mercer and Company, a terse notice. "Due to a clerical error, all inquiries into your financials have been withdrawn. We regret any inconvenience." Michael read it twice, a slow smile spreading. It wasn't an apology, it was surrender. Harold's empire was cracking, Not because of Michael's anger, but because of his refusal to bend. He thought of Emily's plea at Blackwell's, her tearful admission. She'd known her father's reach, yet she'd let him wield it. Her silence had been the deeper betrayal, one Michael couldn't forgive. He called Rachel, updating her on the email. "They're backpedaling," she said, her tone sharp with satisfaction. "The regulator's not done, though. We've got more whistleblowers coming forward." Michael nodded to himself, the bourbon's warmth spreading through him. This wasn't the end, but it was a victory, a step toward a life where his worth wasn't questioned. He leaned back, gazing at the skyline, and felt the weight of the past week's shift. Harold's attack had meant to break him, but it had forged something stronger. Emily's laughter had cut deep, but Linda's ring had reminded him of his value. As the city hummed below, Michael raised his glass to the horizon, to a future he'd build on his terms. Unyielding and unbroken. 6 months had passed since Michael Clark walked away from the life he'd once envisioned with Emily Russell. The Seattle summer had given way to a crisp autumn, the leaves painting the city in hues of amber and crimson. Michael stood on the deck of his new home, a fixer-upper in the quiet suburb of Issaquah, just beyond the city's frenetic pulse. The house was modest, peeling paint, creaky floors, but its view of the Cascade foothills felt like a promise of possibility. He'd spent weekends sanding banisters, laying tile, and coaxing a neglected garden back to life. Each nail driven, each wall painted, was a declaration of ownership, a life built on his terms. In his hand, a mug of black coffee steamed, mingling with the cool morning air. The sapphire ring, Linda's gift, hung on a silver chain around his neck, its weight a steady reminder of his worth. He ran a thumb over it, feeling the stone's smooth surface, and smiled at the horizon. The past months had been a journey of reclamation. The scandal surrounding Mercer and Company had unfolded like a slow-burning fire. The state regulator's investigation, fueled by Michael's complaint and whistleblower accounts, exposed Harold Russell's pattern of financial intimidation. News outlets ran follow-up stories, and ex-posts with hashtag #MercerExposed trended for weeks. Harold's firm lost major contracts, and his reputation, once untouchable, began to fray. Michael didn't gloat. He didn't need to. Justice had been served, not through vengeance, but through truth. Sarah Wilson's offer to join Vantage Technologies as a partner had been a turning point. The role meant more responsibility, a bigger stage for his skills, and a chance to redefine his career without Harold's shadow looming. He'd accepted, diving into projects with a focus he hadn't felt in years. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. A message from Emily. "Can we talk? I'm in town." Michael's chest tightened, a reflex of old wounds, but the ache was softer now, less raw. He'd seen her name less frequently. Her text had stopped after their last meeting at Blackwell's, where he'd drawn a line. Curiosity, not hope, led him to reply. "Brood awakening, 3 p.m. He slipped on a jacket, the ring's chain cool against his skin, and drove into the city. The coffee shop was as familiar as ever, its worn tables and aroma of roasted beans a grounding force. Emily sat by the window, her auburn hair catching the light. She looked different, calmer, her eyes steady, not pleading. She stood as he approached, offering a small smile. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, her voice clear, no longer trembling. They sat, and Emily spoke first. "I've been working with a literacy nonprofit," she said. "I met someone there, David. He's kind, grounded. He sees me for me, not my family's name." Her words were gentle, not a confession, but a statement of growth. "I wanted you to hear it from me, and I wanted to thank you." Michael blinked, caught off guard. "Thank me?" She nodded, her gaze steady. "For walking away. You showed me what it means to stand up for yourself. I was too afraid to do that at Skyview, too tied to Dad's world. You made me see I could choose differently." Her voice held no apology, only gratitude, and Michael felt an unexpected relief. She'd moved forward just as he had. "I'm glad you're finding your way," he said, meaning it. "You deserve that." Emily's smile widened, a flicker of the warmth he'd once loved. "So do you, Michael. I hope you're happy." He thought of his new home, the garden he'd planted, the partnership advantage. "I am," he said, surprised by how true it felt. "I've learned to value myself first." She nodded, her eyes softening. "I'm proud of you." The words landed gently, a quiet closure. They parted with a handshake, no lingering promises, Just two people who'd grown beyond their shared past. As Michael stepped outside, the city's hum, buskers, traffic, laughter felt like a chorus of possibility. Back at his house, Michael unloaded supplies from his truck. Oak planks for a bookshelf, a can of sage green paint for the front door. The work was meditative, each task a step toward permanence. He'd started a pottery class on weekends, finding solace in shaping clay into bowls and vases, each piece a small act of creation. The sapphire ring, now a constant companion, rested against his chest as he hammered nails, its presence a silent affirmation. That evening, he invited his friend Theo over for dinner. They cooked pasta with fresh basil, the kitchen filled with laughter and stories. Theo raised a glass of bourbon. To self-respect, he toasted, and Michael clinked his glass, the sound sharp and clear. Above the dining table, a small painting from Linda, a lake at sunset, its dock stretching into calm waters, hung as a reminder of resilience. Later, alone in the quiet house, Michael stood before the painting, its colors glowing under the lamp's light. An unopened letter from Emily sat on the table, its envelope bearing her familiar script. He didn't open it. Instead, he placed it in a drawer, a relic of a chapter closed. On the mantel, beside the painting, stood a brass compass he'd found at a flea market, its needle pointing north with quiet certainty. He picked it up, aligning it with the painted dock, as if both guided him toward the same truth. His worth was his to define. Sleep came easily that night, the house's creaks and sighs a comforting rhythm. He dreamed of standing on that dock, the lake reflecting an endless sky, his steps steady, unafraid. The next morning, Michael woke to sunlight filtering through new curtains. He poured coffee, the mug warm in his hands, and stood by the window where a potted fern, named Grace, thrived. His phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. Housewarming next month? Bring that bourbon. He grinned, typing back, count me in. Theo's text followed. Better make room for my terrible dance moves. Michael laughed, the sound light and unforced. The house, the ring, the compass, they were anchors, not chains. He thought of Linda's courage, Theo's loyalty, Sarah's trust, and the man he'd become, someone who didn't need a ledger to prove his value. Raising his mug, he whispered to the empty room, to self-worth, unapologetically claimed. The morning light bathed him in warmth, and for the first time, Michael knew he'd found the truest ally, himself.